meaning in life is found to serve some purpose that's greater than oneself. It's not erasing oneself. It's that purpose is harmonized with who you are and what's important to you.
Bill Wilson, co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, wrote in 1952, "If we examine every disturbance we have, great or small, we will find at the root some unhealthy dependence and its consequent demand." Wilson suggested that if we could identify and continually surrender these unrealistic and unrealizable demands, that we may then be able to accomplish what he imagined to be the recovery's next frontier, something he called emotional sobriety. Flash forward 70 years and join psychotherapists and best-selling authors Tom Rutledge and Dr. Alan Berger, who have taken up the mantle of exploring Bill Wilson's new frontier. Welcome to Emotional Sobriety.
Welcome to Emotional Sobriety, the podcast. I'm Tom Rutledge, and we're here for another episode. With me is Patrick Newman, our producer, and Dr. Alan Berger. How are you guys doing?
Well, Happy New Year, Tom. Happy New Year, Patrick, and Happy New Year to all our listeners today. 2022. My goodness.
I know. It's like I was looking at that in directly in contrast to the year I was born, which was 1954, and I was going, uh-oh. I'm not really good at math, but I'm going, I think I'm getting old.
I think you are. I'm going to be celebrating my 70th birthday at the end of this month. So I'm blown away. 1952. So I was born 2 years before you. And I'm sitting here going 70 years on this planet. My goodness.
Yeah. Well, and I know we're not supposed to project into the future, but I can't help but, first voice in my head speaks. So, hey, that's only 30 years to 100.
Yeah, that's right. That's I'm shooting for that, by the way. I'm not so sure.
If we get, well,
when you get to 100, you're going to finally look like you're 60.
Like what?
Like you're 60 when you finally get to 100.
That's a really good point, Patrick. The man does not look 70 years old, does he?
Boy, it's in my bones, though. I got to tell you, Tom. These days,
God, I know.
Cold weather, man. I'm telling you, this cold weather, it's just my bones announce it. I mean, they really do.
Well, you wake up in the morning and we've talked about that, where you have to do kind of a check, of everything to see what works, what doesn't work, what you're going to have to do a little maintenance on before you even get out of bed. It's like
a checklist, like before they're taking off, right? At the,
like Kathy did on the recovery checklist. She was a pilot. We have one on just how to get out of bed. It's
That's coming, Patrick. Hopefully you don't have to worry about those things right now.
No, he's got a while.
How are you doing, Patrick?
Happy New Year. Thank you. Happy New Year back to you guys. And, I think 2021, 2020 was the shit year. And then 2021 was the year where we had begun the process of cultivating a lot of our inner resources, because that was going to be the North Star to get us through whatever external craziness was happening. And so I just feel like going into this year, it's like we've got a model now for hey, whatever happens, I'm going to find a way to be okay. And obviously the Emotional Sobriety Project ties right into that. It's I'm okay even if.
Well, and what you just said is, whatever happens, I'm going to find a way to be okay. It's like that's I was thought immediately. I thought, well, there's a zillion and one ways to define, in a nutshell, emotional sobriety, but that's one of them. It's that we're not, and meaning not like we could interpret that in the most selfish way of saying, fuck all you, I'm going to take care of myself. But the truth is, and we're going to talk about this today because we're talking about purposeful life. And it's like, and it all comes down to value system. And so the idea of being okay for me is when we trust each other, as the three of us do, as we sit here and talk, and we say, are you okay? We're also including, without even saying it necessarily, a congruence with our own value system. So the idea is if I'm mistreating somebody, or if I'm being neglectful to something I need to be doing, in my particular value system, it's like that's not okay. And so I'm not okay. So the idea is when you say, well, no matter what happens, I'll be okay, Patrick, what I understand about that is that knowing you very well as I do now, it's like I'm going like that absolutely includes, working for yourself and doing whatever you can to help those around you that you were able to help. And that's and purposeful life. We talk about this in Alan's your chapter. It's like it's. I think I spent the early part of my days thinking of that in terms of, purpose with a big capital P, meaning I had to have a purpose of life. Instead of I like this idea of purposeful life instead. It's like I want to be able, and purposeful means congruent with my value system, I believe. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah. No, it makes a lot of sense. And look, in some way, what we're going to be talking about is in this, especially in the context of this chapter, is how our purpose really unfolds with our development. And that's what you're saying, Tom, is that our purpose in life, if we're really paying attention to our emotional development, will unfold accordingly, right? As our consciousness changes, so does the purpose. My purpose in life early on in life, especially and this is natural, right? Every child is egocentric.
I call it natural narcissism. It's there are phases in in development where we only see things from our perspective, which is what narcissism is. And it's like when Cece's a little girl, she's not supposed to see it. She's not supposed to be filled with empathy for us.
No. And if our development unfolds, we will move towards exactly what you're saying. As we've been talking on Thursday night, our consciousness starts to expand. Yep. We start to consider things and see things that we couldn't see before. We start to now see that our purpose in life is much different than what we thought it would be at 16 years old, or even at 20 years old, or even like for you and I now at 30 or 40 years old. I mean, look, for you and I, we started this podcast as a complete service to people in COVID, because we got together and we said, look, we know people are struggling and are going to have a difficult time during this period of time. What can you and I do to make a contribution so that we can help people get through this? That was the pure motive we had on that. 60 years ago, I would be thinking, what can I do to get through this thing? What can we do as a community? You and I are very concerned about our community and the community.
Well, but that's a beautiful example because the truth is what you and I would both, we may say it different ways, but I think we would both land on the same place, which is this is very much what we have done for us to get through this thing. This has been, we talk about it often. We talk especially on the Thursday group we talk about, the personal impact that the whole group community has had on us. It's like, but it's just the connection, yours and my connection that used to be every 2 years where we do a workshop. That's what we were doing. And we were loving that. But with COVID, we started doing this, and we brought Patrick on. It's like, so the truth is we could not have seen, this is where hindsight is always where insight comes from. We could not one of the three of us could have seen the role our relationship in doing this work would play in our moving through this COVID crisis and all that goes with it. It's like, no, the thing is what we're doing is, and that's one of the things I was going back to what I was saying about purpose with a capital P. I think when I look back at my life, and one of the things I've learned to do is to do that with compassion instead of criticism of myself, is to realize, when I was looking for this sort of, packaged up, singular purpose of my life, it was like I was missing the point. The point is to approach each day looking for purpose. looking where can I plug in? Where does it fit for me? And it doesn't just mean being of service to others. It means just being, and like I said, congruent with my own value system, which a lot of times has to do with growing, learning, those kinds of things. I mean, one of the most purposeful things I do these days is my morning, my morning reading and kind of / meditation thing where I sit and have coffee before I open up my phone and do that. It's extremely helpful to me and useful to me. And it may be helpful to other people because I'm taking care of myself, but ultimately it doesn't do anything for anybody directly other than myself. But it's very much a part of my purpose.
Well, let me put it, it just struck me when we were talking about this, that what we've done, let's just focus on the where we started with COVID survival skills, so to speak. And then we went to Start Right Here. And now we have this podcast, Emotional Sobriety, the Thursday night meeting that you've helped and supported me through the whole time. So this is an example, and we've been talking about this a lot, and a lot of people have to stop to really listen to this. But, I think this is a good example of it, and I've never thought of it before. We were able to act for ourselves without being selfish, and we were able to act for others without being selfless by doing this.
That's exactly it, man. That's right.
Isn't it?
That's a great example.
Sometimes I struggle to think of an example of it because it's a real high level of thinking about things. But this is, to me, a wonderful example of us doing that. It's not just we're doing it for other people and we're being selfless. We're not. We're getting something out of it, but we're also doing it for other people without being selfless. I mean, it's that wonderful example of what it looks like when you're operating from that position of emotional sobriety.
Right. And see, where my ego would have in the past gotten in the way of that would have been where I would be thinking that I had to have that insight that you just described, prior to doing it or while we're doing it. Again, I know I'm a broken record about this these days, but hindsight is what brings us insight. And it's like, it's like the idea is us by trusting ourselves to take each step at a time and stay and support each other. Because I think that's one of the things that makes living in the present moment so much more. I mean, it's maybe the most important thing that we can do for each other is support each other in just being present in the moment. And the way any of this stuff has transpired and has developed through the last couple of years has been just taking it as it comes. It's like we did the video to start with. You immediately started the Thursday group. It was, that we thought would be for a few weeks, it's like, and it's sort of like I shut my office down for a couple of weeks, it's like, but we did each one of those places. And one of the things that is not, we can honestly say is not selfless for us is one of the reasons when we got finished with the 12 episode video of extra support during COVID is we both said, this is too much fun. We don't want to stop.
That's right.
It's like, so, I mean, so if anybody's listening to us and thinking we're painting a picture of these guys who are just, how can we save the world? It's like we really like being helpful to people. It's a great thing, but it's like, I mean, prime motivator for me was this is really fun.
Yeah. So that's our acting for ourselves without being selfish.
That's right. There's joy in that. It's like, it's joyous. And it's like, in my experience is when that's one of the things that joy is not extracurricular is the way I like to think about it. It's like, everybody doesn't have to, take things, be as silly as I am about things, but we do need to find what brings us joy. And I really do think very often, if not maybe close to always, that's going to bring us in line with things that are important.
Patrick, you started out by saying there's something that jumped out of you at the end of that chapter.
All right. Well, you close the chapter in your book, this particular chapter, with a story about your sponsor, Tom. And you end it by saying this: Tom found his purpose by behaving with increasing emotional honesty and sobriety. As he began to peel back the layers of the onion to reveal his true self, his purpose emerged naturally. This is the path to emotional sobriety and to realizing our human potential. Yeah,
well, it's so true, boy, because you just see the development here. I just had this thing, no promises to be made, but I'm going to ask Tom if he could join us next week to share a bit about his journey and stuff like that and what that would mean for him. So, let's cross our fingers. I think he'll be available, but I can't speak for him. But, it is so true, because I do think that we are, and like we started to mention last time, Viktor Frankl discovered this when he started to develop his approach to therapy called logotherapy, which is finding meaning in life. And what he said is that meaning in life is found to serve some purpose that's greater than oneself. It's not erasing oneself. It's including, like Tom was saying earlier, it's not that you erase yourself to find that purpose. It's that purpose is harmonized with who you are and what's important to you. And different people contribute to it in different ways, I think the actors, the entertainers, the musicians in our world serve a great purpose to our lives. They bring, joy into our life, sadness into our life, depending on the what they're performing and what script they're acting off of. The music, music has been a part of my life forever, and I appreciate so much what musicians bring into our life. And so, that's a great example of somebody finding, having a purpose in life, contributing to the community at large, but at the same time, honoring themselves.
Yes.
And enjoying what they're doing.
Patrick and I both, in reviewing the chapter, independently, both landed on the very last of the chapter. He landed on the last paragraph. I landed on, on the last line, the last little nutshell that says, which follows that chapter. That paragraph, saying our purpose emerges in relation to what the world demands of us. And I wrote that down, and then I wrote a couple other notes. I said, okay, well, that's also our purposes emerge in response to the opportunities that present. And that's what that took me to, is that place where it's an organic process, and then only with that. And what I was saying to you was that in part of my love of this book, my admiration of how this book has turned out, is you and I both know that it's not just the writers who have something to say about this. I don't know how it works, but there's, to take nothing away from your genius, but it's like, the truth is these things fall together as puzzles, and we couldn't see how they do it. But I realized that as we move toward the end of the book, walking through it together, is just how with each chapter now it becomes more poignant, and it brings it home to these very, very essential points. Like the purpose, it's like this, I just hear this puzzle piece kind of clicking in, saying, okay, this is such, and of course, everything we talk about is about translating good concepts into practical, into actual practice. So the idea is, thinking in terms of my life as opportunities for purpose, is a part of a practice. And that's what that brings me to there. And it's like, it's beautiful.
And that changes over time. Like we said, we all start out very egocentric, and I think it's not by coincidence that Bill Wilson said things like, he believed that the root of alcoholism was selfishness, self-centeredness, because what it suggests is that we got stuck. We got arrested at a certain stage of our development. Right. We never grew out of the "it's all about me" stage, I like to call it. We got stuck in the "it's all about me" stage, and we couldn't let that go. And when you're stuck there and you keep trying to apply that to life, you're out of sync with life. Mm-hmm. Because life isn't going to tolerate "it's all about me." It doesn't care. Mm-hmm. It's not going to respect that. It's not going to give us privilege. It's not. It's going to be what it's going to be, regardless of who we are, regardless of how we feel, regardless of what we think. And see, that's the challenge. So if that's happening in our life and we're stuck there, all we can do is get pissed off, object, feel bad, self-pity. All of the different things that start to happen that reflect that, what? I'm just stuck. I'm stuck in the "it's all about me" phase of my development.
Mm-hmm. Right. And our focus there is that we're always looking out at that point and pointing to the obstacles in our lives. And what makes the difference, this is a giant generalization here, but what makes the difference is when something or somebody's help us make that shift where we become intrapersonally focused, when we can become introspective and look and see, okay, wait a minute, the change has to come from within me, not from the brick. It doesn't matter how much that brick wall is impenetrable. It's how I'm approaching the wall that's creating the problem.
That's right. And see, that's one of the effects of the "it's all about me" mentality, right? Yeah. One of the consequences of that is that now, because we demand that life operate according to our set of specifications and rules, we become victimized. Mm-hmm. And see, you've talked about that a lot in your work, Tom. And I think work can be described as helping people grow beyond being a victim, right? Move to the next development. But that mentality turns us into victims. When it's all about me, then when things don't go my way, I'm just disappointed. I'm devastated. Mm-hmm. That's the difference. Disappointment means, God, I wish this would have happened this way. Devastation means I need this to happen this way to be okay. Right. And so many people are so stuck at that, so they've got no ability. And we're going to get into this. I've been doing my continuing education. I love to always bring it like you do. When you read in the morning and stuff, you're just feeding your soul. Mm-hmm. So one of my favorite psychologists is Dr. Martin Seligman. And I love this guy. His career in psychology to me is exemplary. It really reflects the dedication of an academic psychologist to the science of psychology. And he started his whole career off in trying to understand hopelessness and helplessness. Mm-hmm. And he's the guy that came out with this whole model of learned helplessness and the effect that it has on people, right? And he's the first person that said he believes this is a cause of depression. And it turns out he was right on. I mean, more than now that, psychiatry went in this big biological direction, almost everybody in this evolution of psychotherapy conference I just attended said, we've gone astray. It's not biological. It's social. It's psychological, and we got to quit thinking we're going to find a drug that's going to cure it. Mm-hmm. Just because a drug helps, and this is the point that I love that Gabor Mate made. Mm-hmm. He says, when you take ibuprofen and it takes away your headache, it doesn't mean your headache was caused by a lack of ibuprofen. I mean, thinking that mentality is ridiculous. Mm-hmm. So just because an antidepressant increases the serotonin levels, we're making correlation into a causation, and it's not a causation. Mm-hmm. We can't say because this helps that we now know this is proof that serotonin levels, are the cause of the depression. No, it just seems to help the depression. Maybe it's related, maybe it's not, but we can't do that from practice evidence, right? That kind of practice. Well,
and when you're talking about scientific method, you're talking about correlations, not causation. It's and the other piece is we're learning more and more, and I think this is really nice when it happens in the scientific world too. Is we're understanding that the mind and the brain are not necessarily the same thing, and the idea is for somebody who and I'll say that as somebody who's treated for depression, who takes my medication and has been often, I've often said, finding the right medical treatment for my depression changed my life every bit as much as getting sober has. It's like, but I like the idea of it not becoming an all or none thing. So that it's like, oh, well, that's, the only thing I object to is if somebody said, oh, we were wrong, we're off. But like, well, no, we got to just, use your word, expand. It's not like we're not making something wrong. We're saying we have to find
it. We're not saying don't use antidepressant medication.
We need to look closer for the more accurate meaning. And the idea, I love the idea that, that basically I use this stuff because my brain is what it's doing and let's just even say that the mind is something completely separate from the brain. And I'm going like, okay, well, for whatever reason, what I'm doing right now is not sufficient to actually take me to a place where I don't need the medication. It's like, okay, well, that I don't need to, this is one of those things where I don't need to judge myself like I have in the past about stuff like that. So it's like, but the idea that we don't just stop. See, I love it when you talk about stuck. We don't want science to get stuck. We want people to go like, let's keep trying to understand this further. And let's not assume we have the answers because we have some answers.
Yes, that's right. Right.
I love that.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was his first thing. So what he saw is that when a person believes that what they're doing has an impact on their life, they try harder, all kinds of things happen. When you change that perspective, it changes the effort that a person puts out. So that was his first stage of research. His second stage was he looked at optimism and the fact that optimism has on life. And, he saw, and he has a grounded optimism. It's not fantasy based. It's not Pollyanna. It's based on reality, right? Being really grounded and have faith that things can work out if we apply the right strategies, the right thinking, to the situation. So he has that. Then the second thing he's done, because he's the father of positive psychology, he talks about the importance of our attitude as we approach life, right? And that there are things we can do to increase our well-being in life and our experience of happiness. So he put all this stuff together. And why I wanted to tie it into this is it was very interesting. He says, one way of thinking about emotional sobriety now, based on the work like of Seligman and others, is that it really increases our sense of personal agency, which means that we believe that we can make a difference in our life, that the locus of control is within me. It's not out there in the environment. Right. That I can have a positive impact on my life and my experiences in my life. I can solve whatever issues life throws at me and deal with them. Doesn't mean I'm going to be happy all the time, but it means I'm going to be able to cope with whatever's going on. That's within my ability as a human being, is to be able to adapt and cope with whatever life throws at me. Now, it's very interesting when he was talking about it, he says there's three things that go into that sense of personal agency. And the one of them, is what we've been talking a lot about, is that you have to have a curiosity. Yes. And you have to be able to use your imagination to deal with things and to think out of the box sometimes in finding a solution. And I just loved his emphasis on that, is that it was, my God, our imagination is so important in terms of being able to find solutions to situations that baffle us. And I thought that was so cool, and our imagination can be so much impaired by life experience when we're not approaching it that way. Yeah. When we get rigid, when we get fixed, the imagination, all we can imagine is things are going to be terrible. I mean, that's what happens. When imagination gets frozen, all it does is seem to go down in a negative direction, down the dark alley, right? If you think that you don't have an imagination, think about that a friend of mine calls it the director of fiction in her head. Think about all the stories it tells you about the horrible things that are going to come. I mean, it may put Stephen King to shame. I mean, come on. It's like that's your imagination. That's really good. It's our imagination working overtime, baby, but it's working in a way. So now when we put all this stuff in, so what's happening as our development increases, our sense of personal agency increases. See, that's the direction we grow in. We grow towards a more differentiated being, which means that I am not overly influenced by what's going on around me. I have the ability to impact the experience I'm having. And see, that's where then purpose comes in, because now, and that's one of the things that I think is so great about, let's say, the 12-step community. What's our new purpose? Well, one of our new purposes is, and like you said, it is multifaceted, but one of them is to help the person who's still struggling. Yes. We get out of ourselves. We're now a part of a community, and we're thinking, what can I do to contribute to this community in a positive sense? By either going to meetings early on, it was making a cup of coffee or a pot of coffee for everybody instead of just worrying about my own cup of coffee. If Tom comes next week, he's going to tell this story about when he was first newly sober. Flowbird, was his sponsor, looked at him one time, and they're sitting around and stuff. And I think Tom was feeling sorry for herself or something like that. And she turns to him and says, why don't you get out of yourself and do something for somebody else? Well, what can I do? Well, find out if anybody needs some coffee and stuff like that. And what the trip he went through in his head about making coffee for people is hilarious, because he always did this. Yeah. Oh, it's just such a wonderful story about what the fuck am I making this coffee for them for, right? Well, how come they're not making me a cup of coffee? Nobody asked me to make a coffee. It's like it's this whole thing that just reflects his consciousness. And if you meet him today, he'll go out of his way to do something for you without a second thought in terms of this other stuff going on. So it's
one of the things that's always occurred to me. Tell me what you think about this, but I've often thought that I see how effective that is with you talk about the multi layers of this, of the purposefulness of do something for somebody else. I've often thought that just because we need a lot as human beings, and those of us in 12 steps, we don't have a corner on this market, but we're really great examples of extremely flawed human beings, and so we're good test cases. It's like, I think sometimes go do something for somebody else is almost like giving some kid some busy work. Why don't you, because you're not going to figure this stuff out. Why don't you stop trying to figure it out and go over there and help that person do that? And it's like, because the truth is, when we look back, when we're talking about insight, coming from hindsight, you're going like, oh, what was I doing while I was learning that? Oh, you were getting coffee for somebody. We don't have. It's amazing to me that my conscious mind. I still get offended by this sometimes. My conscious mind does not need to be involved in everything I'm learning.
Yes,
it doesn't. Sometimes it just gets in the way.
I hope everybody gets the importance of what Tom just said, because sometimes we put way too much.
I've got to know it. While I have one of my little nutshells is you do not have to understand what's going on while it's going on.
That's right.
It's like it's so hard to let go of. But I love that. And I love the idea. I love the simplicity of what you're talking about here with and back to what you were saying with these psychologists. But because it is sometimes about just that curiosity. That's just one, and humility goes with that. See, because it's amazing to me, those of us with such low self-esteem, how much humility we need.
That's right.
It's like, I feel like shit about myself, but I'm pretty damn sure about it. And it's like, no,
you could be wrong. That's so true. But say that again, Tom, so everybody can hear that. We act like we're so insecure.
We are. It's like, I feel, but it's all, we're not using our power for good. We're using it for destructive purposes. It's like, the truth is, I feel like shit about myself. Well, when I read that thing on Thursday night group not too long ago from my book, Simple Truth, that was about called We're Wrong, where it's just about the idea that we're so easy. We admit that we're wrong about everything else in the world. But if somebody says, hey, maybe you're not a complete piece of shit, you're like, nope, I know that for certain. It's like, no, you don't. Many of us can tell you, we thought that too. We were wrong. It's not the one exception. And you're not the one exception. You're not the one piece of his shit who has just wonderful insight into yourself.
You can't think your way to right action. You can only act your way to right thinking.
Bingo.
Right. I probably annoy people by doing these. I mean, that's an AA thing.
But we got to watch out that we don't make those, we don't rigidify those, right? That they don't become stereotypes too, because it's also true. Sometimes you have to shift the way you're looking at a situation to be able to behave better too. So we're not saying that's a black and white thing. But what happens is, for those of us that have fantasized that things are going to get better without us doing anything about it, that idea about You got to get into action. It's so important. I'm working with a young man right now who's been relapsing for 12 years, and I see why. He gets all of these incredible ideas of what he'd like to do and the life he's going to build, and there's no foundation to any of his fantasy. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to make this happen. I want da-da-da-da-da-da. And you got to have recovery first. None of that stuff is going to happen without recovery, but he always leaves that out. I mean, it's like that never becomes a part of the plan.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And he keeps going ahead and trying to do these things, and it all falls apart. And it all falls apart because he doesn't want to commit himself. I don't know if let me say, he doesn't commit himself. I'm not saying he doesn't want to, because he obviously keeps trying. He doesn't commit himself to his recovery. He thinks that if he does all these things, he'll be okay. And it doesn't work that way. You know, when you talked before, Tom, it really struck me is that we have to go through this phase of let me look at myself. So we start that process of looking at ourselves. And look, being in a relationship is a wonderful vehicle for that, because if you use the experiences you have in your relationship, you're going to use your upset, your disturbance to say, what's going on with me here? How come I'm wrecked, instead of blaming your partner? Now, we know that's also an evolution to get to the point where you're not blaming people for what you're experiencing.
Right. But in relationship is don't blame the mirror, because I don't like what I look at, because that's what you and I know that relationships are many things. But one thing is there is it is a mirror. And the truth is I can look in the mirror and not like how I look and complain about that mirror all day long. Or I can actually get what you're talking about with relationship and say, like, I need to look more carefully and listen more carefully and find out what it is I'm learning.
That's right. That's right. And see, that is one of our purpose. When you say, well, what does it mean to find a purpose in your life? Mm-hmm. One purpose we have that's instinctual is to grow ourselves into what we can be. And what we can be, someone who balances our interest in ourselves with our interest in others. See, that is part of the human potential, is to be able to, like I said earlier, act for yourself without being selfish, act for others without being selfless. That is a possibility in our evolution. That's, I think, what Maslow would call part of what self-actualization looks like, is when you're operating within those kinds of guidelines, right, in your life. So that's one thing, right? Yeah. And and I pulled a quote out of Viscott's work, because I love Dr. David Viscott in this chapter. When I said that, now, do you have that highlighted, Patrick, in your book, the David Viscott quote?
Dr. David Viscott: the purpose of life is to discover your gift. The work of life is to develop it. The meaning of life is to give your gift away.
Wow.
Love it.
I mean, he really captured, the experience early on. We can't see what our gift is because we're still developing ourselves. It's the all about me stage. Mm-hmm, we're still trying to figure out who we are, what's important. And we have to go through that stage of, Tom called it natural narcissism. We all go through a narcissistic stage of development. We've been aware of that. Now, hopefully, we outgrow it. And like we're saying here, one way of looking at addiction, and all addiction is getting stuck at the it's about me stage. So we still make it all about us. But as we start to grow through that stage, now we start to consider ourselves in relationship to the world we live in relationship to ourselves, in relationship to others. And now we start to say, well, what? Because we're wired to have purpose, to give meaning to our life. You see, that's an important part of who we are. We are meaning generators, and we're giving meaning to everything. The thing is that we don't often pay attention to is that part of me enhancing my life or diminishing my life? Because when Tom said before, we have a Stephen King inside of us. And we can give meaning to our life that turns life into a bad horror story. I mean, we really can, man. We can find a lot of meaning, and then meaning in our life comes, I've got to watch out for all those people because they're out to get me. And I know they are. And my job is to protect myself from being taken advantage of, getting hurt, all this stuff where it becomes so self-protecting that we can't live life. We implode.
Or even a paralyzing story. I am so inept. I am so incompetent that no matter what I do, I will fail. So I will just stay right here. I will not move.
I'll stay right here, or I'll kill myself because why bother? I mean, that's where suicide grows out of that kind of mentality. I mean, so all of this. So when we start to attach it to this other purpose, I can make a difference to this community I'm in sometimes in small ways, sometimes in big ways. If I find my gift and what it's about and give it away, now I'm on that path.
Yes. And here's the thing and I promised myself in a little conversation earlier today, I was going to stop doing the hindsight thing, but now I'm going to do it one more time. It's we're not going to know that when it happens. It's like David Viscott. I'm going to guess at this. I don't know. David Viscott did not, when he was writing this, when he wrote this down, the purpose of life is to discover your gift. The work of life is to develop it. The meaning of life is to give your gift away. I'm betting you he didn't just go like, okay, that's it, I'm done. He didn't go like, okay, I have done this. It's like, these three sentences are just, their ripple effect is powerful. We're all touched by these. You've written about it. We've underlined it. I promise you, we're not the only people who underlined and highlighted this in your book. It's like, but they're just three sentences he wrote.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, how many times have somebody quoted you before that you don't even recognize that you said something? Or when you said to me so and so and so and so, you go like, you know, I remember somebody sending me something and I said one time, this is brilliant. You know, who wrote this? He said, you did. It's like, I went, nice. It's like, but the idea is, the cool part is just to say, no, I just need to be in the flow. I need to be here doing this and doing what I can today and wishing for the best.
You don't get to put this one on the shelf and leave it there. It's part of the every day. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's right. It does. And that's Tom is great at talking about practice. You know, this is all about, we're all continuing to grow along these lines. And that's the important thing. All right, you guys, another great show. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Peace out.
Tend your life. Tend your myth. Cultivate your narrative with whomever you're with. Then with glass in hand and children on one knee. Bring some stories, bring your stories back to me. It ain't a crime to be a human. Never be ashamed to be yourself. Rest assured that whatever you're doing will entertain me like nobody else. So here's to us, my old friends, until it's time to drink the wine and break the bread again. With glass in hand and children on one knee. Bring some stories, bring your stories back to me.